Avery stopped in the foyer's warm glow, shoulders trembling, as her eyes fell on the single suitcase by the door. Its black leather shell gleamed under the chandelier light, unzipped and waiting. She swallowed hard, heart pounding like a jagged drum, and swallowed again. This was no careless packing after a tiff. This was deliberate. She stepped forward, fingers brushing the handle, and heard Noah's voice, calm, cold, irrevocable, from the study behind her. "No more games, Avery," he said, his tone as steady as steel. "Leave my house, or I'll ruin you." The words echoed through the silent halls, ricocheting off marble and mahogany. She froze, suitcase half lifted, mind racing through 7 years of marriage, laughter in this room, tears in that corner, their wedding photo above the mantel, now a mocking witness. No anger had preceded this moment, no fight, just calculated cruelty. She let the suitcase drop and spun around. Noah stood framed in the doorway to the study, arms folded beneath his crisp white shirt. His face was unreadable behind a mask of composed detachment. His eyes, once warm with passion, gleamed now with an unsettling certainty. "Avery," he repeated softly, "I warned you." She swallowed past the lump in her throat. "Noah, what's happening?" He shook his head, as if her question was absurd. "You know exactly what's happening." She didn't. She barely recognized the man in front of her. He'd always been passionate, protective, devoted. Until now. Her fingers brushed the edge of the console table, where her wedding ring used to sit. She looked down. A single golden band lay alone on the polished wood. No husband's hand beside it to slip it back on. He'd taken it from her, too. He crossed the distance between them in 3 purposeful strides. Each step felt like a verdict being delivered. "You have 24 hours, he said, voice low. "Tomorrow at lunch, you'll be gone. And if you involve my family, my business, anyone, I promise you'll regret it." She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. The air felt thick, as though gravity itself was pressing her to the ground. He turned away, moving back into the study. The door clicked shut behind him. Avery stood motionless for a heartbeat, then crossed to that door and pressed her ear against it. Inside, she heard the soft tapping of his laptop keys. Business as usual, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Her breath came in tight bursts. She slipped a hand to her belly, feeling the fine gold of the ring, now cold and weightless. Memories, wedding vows, late-night whispers, dreams of children, flitted through her mind like ghosts. She stumbled back toward the suitcase. Fingers tightened around its handle. Her mind flashed to the exodus she'd imagined only in nightmares. Furniture carried out the front door, keys tossed, phone number changed. But she never thought it would be compulsory. Outside the foyer, the grandfather clock chimed the hour. Avery paused, each gong a thud in her chest. She closed her eyes, summoned every ounce of courage. Then she lifted the suitcase and, without looking back, walked through the front door into the humid afternoon air, uncertain of where she would go, but certain of one thing. Tomorrow, her life as she knew it would be gone, and nothing would ever be the same. The evening before, the grand ballroom at the Alderwood Charity Gala had gleamed with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Avery remembered the hush when she and Noah entered, the soft gasp of admiration as the room's spotlight caught her flowing emerald gown. She turned to smile at him, his face the only beacon in the sea of strangers. But he hadn't smiled back. Instead, he'd stood rigid beside her, gaze fixed somewhere beyond the flickering candlelight. His silence had been palpable, a shadow stretching across the night. She'd nudged him, whispered, "Is something wrong?" But he'd only pressed a hand to his forehead and slipped away during the auction's crescendo. She'd watched him go, black-tuxed figure dissolving into the crowd, heart fluttering with a confusion she couldn't name. Minutes passed. The live pianist switched to a waltz. The orchestra struck up another number. Still he didn't return. Finally, she slipped away from polite applause and found him gone, and no message from his phone. Dinner concluded. She sipped the last of her sparkling water, scanning the marble-top tables where plates of seared salmon and roasted vegetables lay half-eaten. Servers flitted by carrying trays of white wine. Guests leaned in to share gossip beneath their masks. But Avery felt the emptiness gnaw at her, a hollow where Noah's presence should have been. She stood and stepped outside onto the terrace. The night air was crisp, scented with roses from the garden below. She let out a slow breath, waiting. But no one came. After 10 minutes, she texted him. "Everything okay?" No reply. She rushed back inside, weaving through the crowd to the valet stand where he'd parked the black Range Rover. The valet shrugged, his brow furrowed. "He told me to leave at 9. The man said he had an emergency. Emergency. Avery's pulse quickened. She dialed his cell again, straight to voicemail. He never ignored her calls or emergencies. She spent the rest of the evening faking smiles with patrons, making small talk with board members. But her mind replayed a dozen moments. His abrupt exit, the blank look on his face, the way his hand trembled against the banister. Back at home, she'd waited in their living room, heels in hand, heart heavy. The clock ticked past midnight. When he finally pulled into the driveway, she flung herself at him. "Noah, where have you been?" He stepped out, suit rumpled, hair mussed. His eyes were dark, tired, maybe guilty. He moved past her without a word and went straight into the study. She followed, anger rising. He closed the door behind him. She stood in the hallway. "Explain yourself." His voice came from inside, muted. "Not now." But she knocked again. "You left me alone all night." Silence. Eventually, he opened the door a crack. His face looked different under the study's lamp, worn, distant, haunted. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "but you wouldn't understand." Her stomach nodded. He'd never said sorry, unless he meant it. She pressed her palm to the doorframe. "Try me." His jaw clenched. He shook his head. "I can't." Avery stared into his eyes, searching for the man she loved. Instead, she found an abyss. Before she could speak again, he shut the door, cutting off her world. Left alone in the hallway, her hand still on the door, she felt the first tremors of fear. Tomorrow, the door might open again, but on the other side could stand an entirely different man, and she had no clue who he'd become. Light spilled through the dining room windows at dawn. Avery stood in the archway, wearing yesterday's dress and bruised with confusion, as Noah slid the single golden band across the polished oak table. The metal caught the sunbeam and winked at her, cold as ice. She stared at it for a moment, unable to speak. The ring represented years of vows, whispered promises, dream-woven plans. He hadn't even looked at her as he laid it down, just placed it there as though it were a foreign object he no longer recognized. He sat across from her, back straight, hands folded. His face was calm, too calm. "I believe," he began in that same steady tone, "that everything in a relationship has its season." Avery's pulse thundered. "What does that mean?" He leaned forward, voice low. "You were mine, and I was yours. But seasons change. Flowers wilt. Leaves fall." She shook her head, heart aching. "That's not how love works." He gave a small, sad smile. "I wish I could agree, but I can't." He tapped the ring. "You should have known this day would come." A shiver ran through her. "Why? Why now?" His gaze flicked away. "It's never been about you." The words were breathless, as if he were forcing them from his chest. "It's about me. My needs. My fears." She pressed her hands flat against the table, knuckles white. "This is cruel." He closed his eyes, as though preparing for a painful confession. "I'm not cruel. I'm afraid." She blinked. "Afraid?" He nodded. "Of losing control. Of being left behind. Of," he exhaled, shoulders sagging, "of hurting the person I love most." Her throat tightened. "You're hurting me." He looked up, eyes glistening. "I know." For a moment, everything hung between them. The ring, the empty chairs, the promise of tomorrow. Then Noah stood. "I want you out by tonight," he said, voice steadier now. "I can't see you here anymore." Avery's legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand. She picked the ring up, sliding it onto her finger again, an automatic gesture, as though hoping the metal would return warmth to her cold heart. He watched her slip the band back on, eyes unreadable. "Don't wear it," he said. "It doesn't belong to you anymore." Her breath caught. The ring felt heavier now, a shackle instead of a symbol. She looked up at him. Then what does belong to me? He closed the distance, reached across the table to cup her cheek. His touch was gentle, familiar, and utterly alien. Nothing, he whispered, except the memories. Before she could protest, he kissed her temple and walked away, leaving her alone with the ring and the hollow ache of his absence. The sun climbed higher, casting light on the golden band, brighter than any beacon, yet more relentless than any storm. Avery's footsteps echoed in the silent bedroom. The faint scent of jasmine lingered in the air, a ghost of happier times. She stepped toward the closet, expecting hangers heavy with silk dresses, tailored suits, her favorite leather coat. Instead, it stood bare, white shelving empty, rods gleaming with nothing. Her breath hitched. Every piece of her life here had vanished overnight. The dresses she'd worn to their anniversary party, the coat he'd complimented on that cold winter morning, the shirts she'd grabbed when they ran late for a brunch date, all gone. She ran her fingers along the smooth wood. A single wire hanger twisted and lonely on the top rod. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. She refused to give him the satisfaction. Noah appeared in the doorway, phone cradled between shoulder and ear, voice low. "Just tell them to remove everything," he said. "I don't want any reminders." He hung up, turned to her without apology. "You have until tonight." Avery swallowed. "Tonight?" He nodded. "By 11. Her heart thundered. 11 hours to gather years of memories, salvage her pride, and leave. She backed away from the closet, hand brushing a small velvet box on the dresser. Inside, her engagement ring, the vintage locket he'd given her on their 3rd anniversary, a faded snapshot of them laughing at the beach. She lifted the box gently, fingers trembling, and tucked it into the suitcase. He watched her silently. His gaze was impassive, as though observing a fascinating experiment. "Do what you need to do," he said. "But after 11, I'm changing locks." He meant it. She felt it in the cool finality of his tone. She closed the closet door and wheeled her suitcase into the hallway. In the master bath, she packed toiletries, the toothbrush he'd given her last Christmas, her lavender soap, the small bag of her favorite perfume. Each item felt heavy with meaning. Memories swirled, their laughter over shared toothpaste jokes, the time he'd caught her stealing his cologne, the mornings waking beside him. Now, everything fit into a single bag. She zipped the suitcase, knelt, and lifted it. The weight surprised her. It was heavier than she expected, as though loaded with every memory she'd ever held. Noah's voice came from behind her. "You know, I didn't plan for this to be easy, but nothing worth keeping ever is." She turned slowly, suitcase at her side. "What about us?" she whispered. He stepped closer, shoulders squared, eyes softening for a fraction of a second. "There's no us," he said. "Not anymore." Her chest tightened. "This isn't how it's supposed to end." He sighed, as if burdened by the truth. "Life isn't a fairy tale." Silence stretched. She met his gaze, searching for any sign of regret, but all she found was resolve. She squared her shoulders and said, "I don't know who you are anymore, Noah, but I do know who I'll become." He looked at her, surprised. Then he nodded once and turned away. Avery lifted her suitcase and walked down the hallway, each step resonating with both fear and determination. Behind her, the empty closet door stood ajar, a silent testament to what she was leaving behind, and a stark promise of the space she would fill with her own future. 2 years earlier, Avery had sat in the sunlit kitchen of Noah's childhood home, sipping tea across from his mother, Margaret. The afternoon light streamed through lace curtains, illuminating family portraits lining the walls, smiling generations captured in sepia tones. Margaret, elegant in a floral blouse, placed her delicate china cup on the saucer and studied Avery with a gentle intensity. "You're wonderful," she began, voice warm like honey. "You've brought light back into Noah's life." Avery smiled, heart swelling with affection. She reached for her cup, but Margaret held up a hand. "I need to tell you something important." Her tone shifted, gravity settling in the air. Avery's smile faded. "What is it?" Margaret leaned forward. "My son, he loves deeply, passionately. But once his heart flips, He can't bear the thought of being hurt. She paused, eyes distant with memory. His father was the same. A chill ran through Avery. His father. Margaret nodded, voice low. Charles, a brilliant man, but he was tortured by fear. He drank to silence the doubts, silenced his family when they tried to help. My husband was a great man until the day he destroyed everything out of terror. He'd lose it all. Avery's throat tightened. She remembered stories of her own grandparents, how fear had torn families apart. She reached across the table and took Margaret's hand. I understand the risks, Avery said softly, but I love him. We'll get through anything. Margaret's eyes glistened. She gave Avery's hand a gentle squeeze. I admire your courage. Just promise me. You'll watch for the signs. If he starts retreating, shutting you out, threatening you, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it as mood swings. Avery nodded, firm. I promise. That day, they'd shared pie and warm conversation, laughter echoing in sunlit rooms. Avery had left feeling comforted, connected to Noah's roots, embraced by his family. She'd tucked Margaret's warning into a corner of her mind, ashamed she hadn't paid closer attention. Now, standing in the bakery apartment above, Avery pressed her palm to the chipped tile countertop, recalling every word Margaret had said. Fear flickered in her chest, a warning siren she'd been too blinded by love to heed. She closed her eyes. The memory of Margaret's gentle warning blended with the harsh reality of Noah's ultimatum. 2 years ago, it had felt like good advice. Now it felt like a prophecy. She opened her eyes to the bakery's morning bustle, flour dust in the air, the hum of ovens warming, Margot humming in the back. The comforting scent of bread rose around her, enveloping her in a warmth she hadn't known in months. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Margaret's warning had been clear. Love could hatch fear, fear could breed cruelty, and cruelty could destroy everything. But Avery refused to let history repeat itself under her watch. With renewed resolve, she squared her shoulders. She'd promised Margaret vigilance. Now, she would honor that promise not with tears, but with action. Her phone buzzed, a text from Margot. Coffee's ready. We need to talk. Avery pocketed the phone and stepped toward the counter, ready to face the day, and whatever truths it might reveal. She would not run again, not without fighting back. And somewhere, deep in her heart, the first embers of her new life began to glow. Avery stepped out into the humid dusk, the suitcase's wheels clattering against cracked pavement as she crossed the street to the small brick bakery. Every footstep felt surreal. She was no longer walking toward her home, but to a rented room beneath the bakery's peaked roof. The wrought iron sign above the door swung gently. Margot's Breads and Bakes. She paused, inhaling yeast-sweet air. This place, once merely a Saturday morning indulgence, had become her refuge. Inside, the warm glow of Edison bulbs lit shelves of sourdough loaves and cinnamon buns. Margot, a sturdy woman with streaks of flour in her silver hair, greeted her with a soft smile. Glad you made it, she said, guiding Avery up the narrow stairs. The apartment above was modest, a single window overlooking the alley, a twin bed, and a small kitchenette. Avery set her suitcase on the floor and sank onto the bed, heart pounding. She ran a hand through her hair, recalling the cold ease with which Noah had ordered her out. She unpacked methodically, toothbrush and toothpaste in a ceramic cup, favorite scarf on a wooden peg, photographs tucked into a canvas pouch. Each item felt both familiar and alien in this new life. She placed her wedding portrait on the bedside shelf, then covered it with a hand-embroidered napkin, its blue stitching still vibrant. Not yet, she whispered. In the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back, eyes wide with fear, chin set with resolve. A knock at the door startled her. Margot appeared, carrying 2 steaming mugs. Chamomile tea, she said softly. You need to calm your nerves. Avery accepted the mug, fingers brushing Margot's. The baker's presence radiated steadiness, an anchor in the storm. They sat on mismatched chairs by the window. Avery wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Outside, a lone car passed, headlights splitting the dusk. He won't get away with that, Margot said quietly. You have rights. Avery exhaled slowly. I don't know what those rights are anymore. Margot tapped the table. Let's figure out tomorrow. Tonight rest. Avery nodded, sipping. The sweetness of honey eased the knot in her chest. She looked out at the darkening street and felt, for the first time since Noah's ultimatum, a flicker of safety. She could stay here, plan her next move, rebuild her life one loaf at a time. Later, as the bakery's ovens cooled, Avery closed her eyes on the firm mattress. She clutched the mug in her hands, breathing in memories of warmth that weren't tied to her marriage. Outside, the city murmured on. Inside, she found a fragile peace. Tomorrow, she would face Noah's world again, but tonight, she rested in a sanctuary of dough and flour, birthing a new beginning from the ashes of her old life. Darkness draped the bakery apartment like a velvet cloak. Avery lay on the twin bed, sheets tangled at her waist, eyes flicking to the silent window. The street lamp cast a narrow beam across the room. Every sound, the distant honk of traffic, the hum of the fridge, felt magnified. She hugged her knees to her chest, heart hammering. Her phone buzzed on the wooden floor. She reached for it, anxiety coiling in her stomach. A message from Noah. Don't talk to anyone about this, or you'll regret it. His words glowed on the screen. She stared at them, disbelief washing over her. Regret it? What did he mean? A chill settled in her bones. She typed a reply. Why are you calling? Then deleted it. What would she say? You threatened me? No, too dangerous. She locked the phone and slid it under the bed. A soft knock at the door jolted her. She froze. Margot's voice hushed. I brought soup. You have to eat. Avery swung her legs off the bed and opened the door. Margot handed her a steaming bowl of chicken, vegetable broth. Just a sip, she urged. Avery lifted the bowl, the aroma nostalgic. She sipped, warmth spreading through her. Margot sat on the bed's edge. He texted. Avery nodded, spoon suspended. He said to keep quiet. Margot frowned. That's intimidation. Avery set the bowl down. She pulled off her slippers and curled under the blanket. I knew I'd be alone tonight, she whispered, but I didn't think I'd be this scared. Margot placed a hand on her arm. You're safe here. I'll stay until you fall asleep. Avery's eyes stung. She nodded silently, grateful. Margot hummed softly, a lullaby of reassurance, until Avery's breathing evened. The baker rose and tiptoed to the door. Good night, she whispered, flicking off the light. Avery lay in darkness, the mattress creaking as she shifted. Fear and relief warred in her chest. She thought of Noah's empty house, rooms he'd stripped of her presence, and of this tiny apartment filled with kindness. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling a steady beat. She was alive. Minutes passed, and the lullaby in her mind faded. She drifted toward sleep, haunted by uncertainty but buoyed by Margot's promise. You're safe here. In the silence, Avery realized the first night alone was never truly lonely. It was a threshold, 1 foot in fear, 1 in newfound freedom. Mid-morning sunlight streamed through the bakery's front window as Avery sat at a small round table, stirring black coffee. The clink of cups and murmur of conversation filled the air. She cradled the warm mug, guilt tugging at her. She hadn't been hungry since she left, yet now her body demanded sustenance. Margot bustled behind the counter, calling out orders. An elderly woman with kind eyes and a patterned headscarf entered, glancing around until she spotted Avery. She approached, offering a tentative smile. May I? She asked, gesturing to the vacant chair. Avery nodded. Of course. The woman sat, smoothing her wrapper. You're Avery, right? She said softly. Avery's heart stuttered. I know Noah's face anywhere. A chill ran through Avery. You know him. The woman nodded. I'm Mrs. E's. I used to see him walking home from work years ago. He carried your picture, his wedding portrait, like treasure. She paused, eyes distant, until he came here, to this bakery. Avery blinked. Here. Mrs. E's glanced around, lowering her voice. He asked about a girl named Elise. She worked here before. Avery's breath caught. Elise. Mrs. E's leaned closer. He asked if she'd been asking questions about him. He sounded angry, desperate. She shivered slightly. And then Elise vanished. Avery's mug slipped from her fingers, coffee sloshing onto the table. V vanished. Mrs. E's nodded, eyes sad. She left town. Nobody heard from her. Folks said she got a job overseas, but some of us worried. She reached out, touching Avery's hand. Be careful, dear. He does this to people. Avery's mind whirled. Elise. The name echoed in her nightmares. The same urgency she'd felt. He threatened me. Mrs. E's lips pressed together. He always threatens when he feels betrayed. Avery's heart raced. She imagined Elise, uncertain and alone years ago, paying a similar price. Why, she whispered. What was her crime? Mrs. E shook her head. She wouldn't stay silent. She asked questions he didn't want answered. Avery stared at her coffee, swirling dark and ominous. Elise had been looking into him, like Avery. She swallowed hard, anger and fear coiling inside. Mrs. E patted her hand. You're not alone. Keep asking questions. Find Elise. She might have answers. Avery nodded, resolve hardening. She stood, sliding bills across the table. Thank you, she said quietly. Mrs. E smiled wistfully. Be safe, child. Back in the apartment, Avery replayed the conversation. Elise. Each clue bound Avery more tightly to Eleanor's fate and to her own. She couldn't turn back now. That night, she lay awake, mind buzzing with possibilities. Tomorrow, she'd dig deeper into Elise's story, Noah's secrets, and the truth he tried to bury. The next morning, Avery rose before dawn. She brewed strong coffee and spread old newspapers across the kitchenette table. Newspaper archives from 6 years ago lay open. Community events, obituaries, real estate notices. She scanned each headline, searching for Elise's name. At the local library, she examined microfilm reels. The grainy images flickered on the screen. Photos of Elise at the bakery, smiling beside Margot as they displayed fresh croissants. The date stamped March 2019. Then nothing. Elise's image disappeared. No wedding announcement. No obituary. No trace. Frustration clenched Avery's chest. She closed her laptop and stepped outside, the midday sun warm on her face. She walked to the small plaza where Noah had proposed. The fountain was dry now, tile chipped, but she knelt by its edge and brushed her fingers over the cool stone. Elise had likely stood here once, maybe hoping for a fresh start, only to be swallowed by silence. Avery returned to the bakery, breathless. Margot greeted her with a knowing look. Find anything? Avery swallowed. Elise existed, but she left no trail. Margot frowned. What about her family? Avery shook her head. No records. It's as if he wiped her from existence. Margot placed a hand on Avery's shoulder. He's good at that. Determination flared. Avery would not let Elise vanish twice, in Noah's memory and in her own search. She spent the afternoon canvassing neighbors, the florist down the street, the security guard at the office complex, an elderly gardener in the community park. Every lead ended in a dead end or a hurried apology. No one remembered. As dusk settled, Avery felt the first sting of doubt. Was her quest futile? She sank onto the apartment bed and closed her eyes, willing clarity. But only questions remained. Then her phone buzzed. A private message from an unknown number. Are you Avery? Her pulse spiked. Yes, she replied. Meet me at the Lakeside Pavilion at midnight. Come alone. Avery stared at the screen. Her breath caught. Who would message her about Elise? Was this a trap or a lifeline? She pocketed her phone and stared out the window at the moonlit street. The world slept, unaware of her silent battle. But Avery knew she was on the cusp of something, dangerous and necessary. She rose and lit a single candle, its flame flickering against darkness. She placed her wedding ring beside it, just for the moment, and whispered, Elise, I'll find you. Avery arrived at Meadowview Care Home just after 11. The stately red brick building loomed under overcast skies. She clutched the note in her hand. Ask for Mr. Prescott's son's wife. Inside, the lobby smelled of antiseptic and lilies. A receptionist glanced up. I'm here to see Margaret Prescott. Second floor, room 214. the receptionist said. Down the hall, third door on the right. Her heart pounded as she rode the elevator. On the second floor, the hallway lights hummed softly. Room 214's door stood slightly ajar. Avery knocked gently. Come in, croaked a voice. Avery entered. An elderly man in a wheelchair faced a window. His white hair was thin, and his shoulders stooped beneath the knitted cardigan. He turned slowly. Recognition flickered in his pale blue eyes. Noah's father? Avery asked softly. He nodded. I am. Call me Daniel Prescott. He gestured to a folding chair. Sit. Avery sat, smoothing her skirt. Thank you for seeing me. He studied her. You're the wife he drove away. Her throat tightened. I needed answers. He wheeled closer, voice trembling. I watched my son change when he married you. You brought him light. Avery blinked back tears. Then why did he push me out? Daniel's gaze grew distant. His fear became a poison. He couldn't bear abandonment. His mother died when he was young. He blamed himself. He paused, voice thick. I warned Margaret before she married him. Avery's heart ached. You warned her. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I begged her. Don't let him lock you in his world of fears. She laughed and said you two would be fine. He closed his hand over hers. I was wrong. Avery swallowed. What happened to his first wife, Elise? Daniel's eyes darkened. She tried to leave. He panicked. Took her to the lake house. Told her she owed him loyalty. The next morning, she was gone. Gone, Avery whispered. He nodded slowly. She left everything, phone car, her job. He insisted she'd forgotten her bag at our home. He coughed. When we called, she vanished. Avery gripped his hand. Do you know where she went? Daniel shook his head. No. She stopped at a bus station and disappeared. He drew a shaky breath. My son destroyed his own life to protect himself. Avery pressed her lips together. Daniel's confession confirmed her fears and sharpened her resolve. He patted her hand. Be careful, dear. If you can't control his fear, it will control you. Avery stood, heart heavy but unwavering. Thank you. On the ride home, her mind raced with new truths. Noah's childhood wounds, Elise's disappearance, her own precarious place in his world. She glanced at her phone. Midnight would bring the lakeside meeting. As the lights of the city flickered by, Avery clenched her fists. She would face him, Elise, Noah, and her own fate, until every secret was laid bare. Margot wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron as she slid a fresh tray of baguettes from the oven. Avery watched her, heart pounding. Yesterday's revelations at the care home swirled in her mind, and she needed more. She cleared her throat. Margot, she began, voice low. You said Elise worked here. Do you remember much about her? Margot paused, set the tray on a cooling rack, and turned. Her eyes were soft but serious. Elise was quiet, polite, a hard worker. She loved making pastries. She had this gentle way of shaping dough, like she was coaxing life from it. Avery leaned forward. And that day you said Noah came here. Margot nodded, pulling her hair back into a bun. He came in around 2 in the afternoon. The bell jingled, and he stood at the counter like a storm cloud. She clasped her hands. I'd never seen him so urgent. Avery gripped the edge of the counter. What did he say? Margot's brow furrowed. He asked where Elise was working today. I told him she was off. Her day off was Wednesday. She glanced over her shoulder, voice dropping. He said it was important. Something about questions she shouldn't be asking. I thought he meant about your business, your marriage. She shook her head. I didn't realize until later. Avery's pulse rattled. What did you do? Margot exhaled and rested both hands on the counter. I said I didn't know why he didn't come himself tomorrow. He looked desperate. Then he left without a word. Avery's stomach twisted. And Elise never came back to work. Margot's eyes glistened. She didn't. I called her apartment, no answer. I texted, no reply. I waited 3 days, then had to let her position go. I reported her absence to HR, but they said she'd been removed. Avery's throat constricted. Removed? Margot nodded slowly. I asked them, but they just said she left on good terms. She picked up a whisk and turned it in her hand. I thought it was strange. Elise never missed a day in 2 years. I tried to find her, called her family, friends. No one knew where she'd gone. Silence pressed between them, punctuated by the hum of the ovens. Margot's voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes I wonder if he threatened her, like he did you. Avery's heart thundered. Did you ever tell me this before? Margot shook her head. I didn't want to scare you. You were already going through enough. But after what you told me, I realized I have to tell you everything. Avery closed her eyes, absorbing the weight of history repeating itself. Elise had vanished under Noah's shadow. Now Avery was scrambling to survive it herself. She reached across the counter, took Margot's flowery hand, and squeezed it. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. I need to know the truth. Margot nodded, eyes resolute. I'll help you find her. Avery drew a shaky breath, determination ignited. Elise's fate would not become Avery's. She would unearth every secret, no matter how buried. Moonlight spilled through the bakery window as Avery sat on the edge of the bed, recalling the locked room in Noah's house. The memory was sharp. A heavy oak door at the end of the hallway, polished to a high sheen, its brass knob refusing her touch. She closed her eyes and slipped back to that afternoon. 6 years earlier, she'd followed Noah upstairs after dinner, curious about the faint strains of piano music she'd heard humming through the walls. He'd opened the door a crack. This is private, he'd said gently, blocking her view. Avery had pressed her forehead to the crack. You play beautifully, she whispered. He'd smiled softly, but his eyes were firm. Some things are better left unseen. She'd protested, finger tracing the wood grain. Why? He closed the door. Trust me. She'd never questioned him, until now. Avery rose and padded to the kitchenette, pouring herself a glass of water. The locked room had always felt like a shrine to something he guarded fiercely. Had it been Elise's sanctuary? A place of memories she could never share? She returned to the bed and stared at the plain wall. If she could slip back into Noah's house, just long enough to glimpse inside. But that felt impossible. She shivered at the thought of breaking in. Better to find another way. Morning came, and she brewed strong coffee. Margot arrived with fresh pastries. Over cinnamon rolls, Avery shared her memories. I never forgot that door, Avery said, biting into flaky pastry. If Elise played there, maybe someone else remembers. A neighbor, a contractor. Margot nodded thoughtfully. When I helped you pack your things, I passed that door. It looked untouched, no dust, nothing moved. She took a sip of tea. He must never enter. Avery's jaw clenched. If Elise kept her things there, they might still be behind that door. Margot frowned. How will you get the key? Avery tapped her fingers on the table. Maybe I'll ask the realtor. They handled the lake house sale. If they entered that room. Margot's eyes widened. That's smart. Over the next days, Avery pestered the real estate agent, Mr. Danvers, for details about every locked room in the property portfolio. He was reluctant but eventually mentioned a second property, Noah's childhood home, where the piano stood. Locked room, Danvers had said. He kept in Noah's old study. Avery's pulse shot. The study was where she'd packed the first suitcase, but the piano room was upstairs, untouched. If she could locate that key. She spent late nights mapping the house's layout from memory. The foyer, the dining room, the study, the locked piano room. Each door a puzzle piece. One evening, she slipped into Noah's house, thanks to a spare key she'd taken months ago, and crept past the study. Heart pounding, she found a small key ring on the desk, drawer she'd never opened. Her breath caught as she slid the brass key off its ring. In the hallway, she stood before the oak door again. Her hand trembled as she inserted the key. It clicked. Avery's stomach twisted. Next, she'd open the door and finally face what he'd hidden for so long. Avery caught the real properties sign swinging in the breeze as she approached the modest office. Mr. Danvers, a gentleman in his 50s, stood behind his mahogany desk, sorting through a stack of files. He looked up, eyebrows raised. You again, he said dryly. You've got a knack for unearthing my files. She offered a tentative smile. I'm sorry to be a nuisance, but I need to know about every property Noah owned, especially the lake house. Danvers sighed, removing his glasses. It was a fixer-upper when he bought it. He renovated most rooms, but left a few untouched, for sentimental reasons, he said. He tapped a folder. I sold it last year. Avery's heart raced. Can I see the photographs from the listing? He hesitated, then handed her a printed portfolio. She flipped through images, a grand foyer, marble floors, a roaring fireplace, and then a doorway she recognized. The locked piano room. The listing called it private study and downplayed its significance. The listing said private study, Avery said, voice tight. But that's the piano room. Danvers leaned back. He insisted we keep it a study, a quiet area for reflection. Avery's pulse thundered. What about documents? Maps? Floor plans? He rifled through the folder and produced a hand-drawn floor plan. This is the original layout, dated 2012. He pointed to a small wing labeled music room. Key was kept in his study drawer. She traced the label with her fingertip. Do you have a copy of the sale contract? Danvers shook his head. Company policy. He folded his hands. You're his wife, though. I assume you've legal access. Avery clasped her hands. I left under duress. He revoked everything. His gaze softened. I wasn't aware. If you present me a power of attorney, I can release the files. Avery exhaled. Thank you, Mr. Danvers. I'll get that. Outside, she sank onto the office steps, clutching the portfolio. The photos confirmed the room's existence and its contents. A gleaming grand piano, sheet music stacked on a carved walnut desk, family portraits lining the walls. Her mind spun. In that room lay his memories, and perhaps Elisa's. The photographs hinted at delicate pastries on a side table, Margot's handiwork, confirming Elise had played there, surrounded by warmth. As she studied the images, an idea formed. She could retrieve the sale contract through legal channels, gain full access to every key Noah had relinquished. Then she'd open the piano room and uncover what he'd hidden for so long. She rose, portfolio in hand, and dialed Margot. He sold the house, she said breathlessly. But I have the floor plan, and I can get access to the keys. Margot's voice crackled with excitement. Then let's open that door. Avery's chest tightened. The moment of truth was coming. Behind that locked door awaited answers. Answers that would either break her or set her free. Dawn found Avery behind the wheel of her battered sedan. Floor plan spread across the passenger seat. The road to Lake Greenwood wound through rolling fields and dense woods. Mists clung to the trees, and sunlight sliced through in golden streaks. She arrived at the faded wooden gate bearing chipped letters, Greenwood Estates. Rusted hinges squealed as she pushed it open. The driveway stretched, flanked by overgrown hedges. At its end stood the lake house, once majestic, now forlorn. Vines crawled up its stone facade. Shutters hung crookedly. Avery exhaled, steeling herself. She consulted the floor plan and approached the front door, key ring in hand. The lock turned, and the door creaked inward. Inside, dust motes danced in slanted sunlight. The grand foyer boasted a marble floor cracked in places. Sheets of plastic-covered furniture, a relic of halted renovation. She stepped carefully, heart pounding, and headed for the piano room, guided by the plan. The hallway's wallpaper was mottled and peeling. She paused at a sideboard, where a tarnished silver tray held 2 crystal decanters, empty, dusty. Her reflection in one decanter gleamed back, determined and wary. At the end of the corridor, the oak door stood as she remembered. She slid the brass key into the lock. It clicked. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open. The room beyond was lit by a single skylight, illuminating layers of dust on the grand piano's ebony curves. Sheet music lay scattered on the floor. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Chopin's Nocturne. She knelt to pick up a page. Elisa's handwriting annotated the margins in neat cursive. A sense of reverence swept over her. Elise had practiced here, left her mark. Avery pressed her palm to the piano's lid, imagining the woman's fingers dancing across the keys. She surveyed the rest of the room. A carved walnut desk stood against the far wall, its drawers slightly ajar. Avery approached and opened the top drawer, revealing yellowed photographs, portraits of Elise smiling beside a younger Noah, both sunlit and carefree. A locket lay atop the photos. She opened it. Inside, a tiny photograph of Elise alone. Tears blurred her vision. Elise had been real, vibrant and full of hope. Now Avery knelt on the floor, assembling the scattered sheet music, gingerly placing the locket in her pocket. Suddenly, footsteps echoed outside. Avery froze, heart leaping. She slammed the desk drawer shut and turned off the skylight's rope, plunging the room into shadow. The oak door creaked. A man's silhouette filled the doorway. Avery. She swallowed. Noah. He stepped inside, eyes wide. What are you doing here? She rose slowly, clutching the locket. I'm finding the truth. He advanced, voice low. Get out. Avery squared her shoulders. Not until I hear it. He hesitated, gaze flicking to the piano, the desk. Then his jaw clenched. This isn't your place. She held up the locket. Tell me where Elise is. Noah's eyes darkened. He took a step forward. You shouldn't have come. Avery's breath stuttered as thunder rumbled over the lake outside. Answers lay within these dusty walls, and she refused to leave without them. The lumbering gatekeeper emerged from the shadows as Avery drove up the lake house's cracked driveway. Old Mr. Jennings, caretaker of the Greenwood property, leaned on his cane, eyes narrowed beneath the weathered hat. He watched her approach, arms folded. She hesitated, heart pounding from her encounter with Noah. Mr. Jennings, she called. He hobbled forward, voice gravelly. Avery Prescott. She nodded, rolling down the window. I need answers. About Elise. He studied her through thick lenses. She was here, he said quietly. He brought her before she vanished. Avery's pulse quickened. What happened? Jennings sighed, shifting on his heels. He's a dangerous man when cornered. He asked me to let her stay here, keep her hidden. His gaze drifted to the shuttered windows. She came for refuge, but when she tried to leave, he stopped her. Avery's throat tightened. Did you see what he did? He closed his eyes, as though recalling a nightmare. I heard the argument. I kept watch from the woods. She begged him to let her go. He promised she'd understand later. He paused, voice thick. Next morning, she was gone. Avery swallowed. Did you search for her? Jennings nodded. You couldn't go far. This lake is remote. I looked, but no sign. She left a scarf on the dock, and that was it. She pressed her lips together. What about Noah? Did he come back? Jennings spat on the ground. He didn't look back. Sold the place a year later. Never spoke of it. Avery stared at the house. Why did he want her hidden? He tapped his cane. He said she knew too much about him, his past. He wanted loyalty he could control. A cold shiver ran down her spine. So he locked her away. Jennings gazed across the water. He does this to women who refuse to be silenced. He brings them here, and no one ever hears from them again. Avery's fists clenched, but she escaped. He offered a sad smile. She had spirit. She took a step forward. Do you know where she went? He shook his head. No, but I know she left a trail down the old logging road. There's a bench where she met a delivery man once. He might have helped her. Avery's heart leapt. Do you know his name? Jennings thought. Clark, Frank Clark. He drove a white van. She nodded, determination flaring. Thank you. He raised a gnarled finger. Be careful, Miss Prescott. You're the next in line. He won't stop until he thinks you've disappeared, too. Avery swallowed fear. I won't let him. He tipped his hat. Good luck. As she drove away, the lake house receded behind her. She replayed every warning, Margaret's caution, Margot's concern, Daniel's sorrow, Jennings's final words. Elise had survived. Avery would, too. Beside her on the seat lay the locket and sheet music, proof of a woman who refused to vanish. Avery's jaw set. She would find Frank Clark, follow Elise's trail, and bring the truth into the light, no matter the cost. Avery stood at the threshold of the grand foyer, her breath caught in her chest. The ornate chandelier overhead cast fractured light across the marble floor, illuminating the single suitcase she had left by the entrance. In her hand, she held the locket and photographs discovered in the piano room, tangible proof of Elise's existence. She felt the weight of years of betrayal pressing on her shoulders, each step echoing the fragments of memories he'd tried to bury. The portraits that lined the hallway, ancestors with stern faces and curious eyes, seemed to judge her intrusion. Every heartbeat thundered within her chest, each pulse fueling her resolve to confront the man who had hidden everything from her. Time seemed to slow. Each breath felt like wading through thick fog. She wondered if he recognized the determination in her eyes or dismissed it as naivete. She would force him to acknowledge Elise, even if it dismantled their entire world. She cleared her throat and called into the depths of the house. "Noah." Her voice echoed against the polished walls. Seconds passed. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, approached down the corridor. He appeared in the archway, dressed in a dark suit, expression cool and detached. His sharp gaze swept over her, lingering on the locket peeking from her palm. "What are you doing here, Avery?" he asked, voice measured. He folded his arms. The calm in his tone felt like ice. She took a step forward, voice trembling yet firm. "I know about Elise. I found her photographs, her sheet music, her locket. I've seen the room you kept locked away. I've traced her trail. Now I want the truth." Noah's eyes narrowed fractionally. He gazed at the stolen trinkets in her hand and then back at her face. "You don't know what you're meddling with." "I know enough," Avery insisted, stepping closer. "I know you brought her here, silenced her questions, and then erased her. I deserve to know why." He sighed as though the burden were unbearable. "Some stories end for a reason. If you dig any deeper, you will only open old wounds." She lifted the locket and slipped it around her neck, its weight grounding her. "Those wounds already bleed. I'd rather face the pain than live in ignorance." Noah's lips curved into a faint, pitying smile. "You're walking a dangerous line. There are forces in my world you cannot imagine." Avery's heart pounded, but she refused to retreat. "You threatened me once. You told me to stay silent. Now I'm speaking." He took a step closer, his posture rigid. "I protected you from truths that would destroy you. You're a fool for pursuing this." She steadied her voice, fueled by rage and grief. "I'd rather be a fool than a liar. I'd rather live knowing than die in deception." Noah's face trembled, as though an internal struggle raged behind his composed mask. Then he looked away, voice dropping. "You don't want to know what waits at the end of your search." Avery's eyes glistened with tears. "I already know it's the truth." He nodded slowly, a gesture of both resignation and warning. "Then so be it." He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading. She stood alone in the silence, the weight of his evasion pressing on her chest. Avery closed her eyes, exhaling in quiet determination. He had refused to speak, but his silence spoke volumes. She placed a hand over her locket. Elise's story would not be buried again. Avery lay awake in the bakery's attic room, the glow of her bedside lamp casting long shadows across the wooden floorboards. Every creak of the oven downstairs felt like an echo in her mind. She stared at the ceiling, replaying Noah's refusal to speak, the chill of his last words still hovering in the air. She tried to calm her racing thoughts, reached for her journal, and scribbled a reminder. Find Frank Clark. Track Elise's path. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen glowed Margot. Avery's pulse spiked. She tapped open the message. He was here. Asked if you'd been asking questions. A chill ran down her spine. She grabbed the phone and dialed Margot immediately. "Hello." Margot's whispered voice trembled. "Margot, where are you?" Avery sat up, blanket pooling around her knees. "At the bakery door." He knocked. Avery swung her legs over the edge of the bed. "When?" 10 minutes ago. He asked for you. Said he wanted to talk." Her heart pounded. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were asleep. He said, 'Tell her to open the door, or I'll make sure she never sleeps again.'" He sounded angry. Avery pressed her hand to her mouth. "He's dangerous." Margot sniffed. "I'm scared, Avery." Avery took a deep breath. "Lock the back door." Hide in the kitchen until I get there. I will. Avery ended the call and threw on jeans and a jacket. She grabbed her keys, her mind whirling. She left her phone on Do Not Disturb and slipped downstairs, lantern in hand. Outside, the alley was dark, but she navigated by moonlight. The bakery's back door rattled in the wind, but Margot had locked it. Avery crept to the front window. Through the glass, she saw Noah's silhouette pacing on the porch. His figure was rigid, impatience radiating from him. He raised his head as if sensing her presence, staring into the window's darkness. Avery swallowed. She needed to protect Margot and herself. She slipped around to the side alley and found the cracked basement window she'd used once before to hide. But tonight, she couldn't hide. She had to face him. She pressed her forehead to the window pane and called out softly, "Noah, stop this." He froze, head cocked. He glared up at the roofline. "Avery," he rasped, voice low. "You should have stayed away." She pressed her palm to the cold glass. "I won't run from you." He took a step back, fists clenched. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." She closed her eyes. "I know you fear losing control. That's why you hurt people you love." His shoulders sagged, a flash of conflict crossing his features before he masked it. "Go home, Avery. This path will only end in ruin." Avery's resolve steel-hardened. "I will finish this." He sneered, "Then prepare to pay the price." Avery watched him pace once more, then vanish into the night. She climbed back to the upstairs door, heart racing. Inside, Margot waited, terror in her eyes. Avery reached for her hand. "He'll be back. We need to leave now." Margot nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Together, they packed an overnight bag. As the first pale light of dawn touched the sky, Avery realized she had ignited a storm, and there was no turning back. 3 o'clock in the morning, and the world outside the bakery was silent. Avery lay huddled in Margot's tiny apartment, the air thick with unease. Every distant rumble of a passing car made her flinch, expecting the sliding door to jerk open and Noah to stalk inside. She clutched her phone but refused to call the police. Any digital trail could lead him back. She needed a plan. A sudden knock at the bakery door shattered the fragile quiet. It reverberated through the floorboards, sharp and insistent. Avery sat bolt upright, pulse spiking. "That sounded like him," Margot whispered. Avery pressed a finger to her lips. She crawled to the window and peered through the crack between wooden slats. In the dim porch light, Noah's silhouette stood framed by the glass, shoulders squared, jaw set in grim determination. "He's here," Avery said, voice tight. Margot shook her head. "I can't face him." Avery opened the back door quietly and stepped into the empty bakery, every sense alert. The doorbell jingled as Noah rapped his knuckles against the counter. He spoke softly. "Avery, open up. I never meant to scare you." Her stomach twisted. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, voice echoing in the cold room. He leaned against the counter, gaze flickering with vulnerability. "I just wanted to talk, to make you understand." She scoffed. "Understand what? That you threaten women who seek the truth." He pushed away and paced. "I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you from a darkness you couldn't bear." She crossed her arms. "You can't protect me by controlling me." He stopped, turning back to her. The light caught his eyes, raw, conflicted. "I'm lost, Avery. I don't know how to keep you safe." She took a step closer, voice gentle but firm. "Let me decide what's safe. Let me help you." He swallowed hard. "I don't deserve your help." She held his gaze. "You deserve honesty." He exhaled, patting the door frame. "Will you open the door?" She hesitated. He seemed vulnerable, but he was still dangerous. He lowered his voice. "Let me in, and I'll tell you everything." Avery studied him in the dim glow of the porch lamp. Danger and desperation warred on his face. She realized this was her chance. He needed her help more than she needed his explanations. She unlocked the door and stepped aside. "One chance," she said. He entered, shoulders sagging in relief. "Thank you." As he crossed the threshold, Avery realized the dynamic had shifted. Now he depended on her. She would wield that power wisely, or risk losing everything. Sunlight filtered through the bakery apartment's curtains as Avery woke to an unsettling quiet. She yawned and reached for her toothbrush, only to grasp empty air. The small ceramic cup was empty. Her stomach dropped. She knelt to check her suitcase, breath catching. The toothbrush she had packed was gone. Her heart pounded. She rifled through her bag, unfolded clothes, emptied pockets, no toothbrush. Even the backup she kept under the sink had vanished. Someone had been here. Avery's mind raced. Noah. He must have entered while she slept, rifled her things to intimidate her. Fear flared. She raced to the door, checked the lock. It was still secure. He'd found another way in. She backed away, hands shaking. The violation cut deeper than any threat. He had invaded her sanctuary. She needed facts, not panic. She took out her phone, scrolled through texts. No calls or messages between midnight and sunrise. The gallery of notifications confirmed her suspicion. Forced entry, stealth. A knock came at the door. Avery spun around. It was Margot, carrying breakfast on a tray. "I found this downstairs," Margot said gently. "Figured you needed something to eat." Avery's hand went to her mouth. Someone took my toothbrush last night." Margot's eyes widened. "Here." Avery nodded. "It means he was inside." Margot placed a hand on Avery's arm. "He's crossing lines." Avery took a deep breath. "I need to assume he can get in anywhere. We need to change the locks, install cameras." Margot frowned. "What about the police?" Avery shook her head. "Digital evidence will trace back to him. He'll know we called them." She paced the tiny room, mind racing. The missing toothbrush was a message. He could invade her space at will. She felt exposed in every corner. She rummaged in her bag and pulled out a compact mirror. She peered at herself, eyes wide with alarm. She set the mirror on the counter beside Margot's apron. "We start today. Locksmith first thing. Then I call a security consultant." Margot nodded, worry etched on her face. "I'll pack a bag too, just in case." Avery bit her lip. "We need escape plans. Alternate routes. Nobody warns you about how helpless you feel when someone has your scent, your toothbrush." She forced herself to breathe. The missing toothbrush was a wake-up call. No more hiding. She would reclaim control of her space and her life. Avery disguised herself with sunglasses and a loose trench coat as she entered the walnut-paneled waiting room of Dr. Simone's office. She claimed to be Noah's sister, called in for an emergency consultation. The receptionist hesitated but took a hastily written note from Mrs. Prescott, summoning Dr. Simone immediately. A young assistant led her through a corridor. Avery's pulse pounded. She was intruding on her husband's confidences, but she had no choice. Dr. Simone opened the door. Tall, compassionate eyes studied her. "Miss Prescott?" Dr. Simone asked. "Please," Avery said crisply. "I'm here for his appointment." She followed into the office. The room smelled of cedar and calm. Shelves lined with psychology texts stood behind a plush leather chair. In the corner, a framed certificate. Dr. Simone, clinical psychologist. Dr. Simone gestured for her to sit. Avery settled, watching the closed bookshelf that might hold confidential files. After a moment, Dr. Simone frowned. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" Avery swallowed. "I need to understand Noah. He's been distant, controlling. I thought you might explain." Dr. Simone's face softened. "Your husband struggles with abandonment. I warned him. He panics when he feels love slipping away." Avery's chest tightened. "What happens then?" Dr. Simone paused, choosing words carefully. "He resorts to control. If he believes loyalty is threatened, he destroys the relationship first to avoid being hurt." Avery's vision blurred. "Is that common?" He shook his head. "It's a self-protective mechanism he inherited. His father did the same." Avery clenched her fists. "I felt his threats. His manipulation." Dr. Simone nodded. "He fears vulnerability. He thinks if he wields power, he won't be abandoned." Avery absorbed each word. "How do I reach him?" He studied her. "By showing him stability. Boundaries. If he sees you won't be frightened, he may learn trust." She exhaled. But what about Elise? She tried to leave him. He silenced her. Dr. Simone closed his eyes. He believes he's protecting people from themselves. It's dangerous. Avery's heart ached. She realized she needed careful strategy, not confrontation. Thank you. As she left, she felt both heartbreak and clarity. The missing toothbrush, the midnight knocks, the threats, all were symptoms of his terror. She now held the key. If she could stand firm, show him she would not flee, she might break his cycle. Stepping into the hallway, she dropped the trench coat, lifted her head, and strode toward the door. She understood at last how to save both Elise's memory and her own future by refusing to be afraid. Avery remembered her 34th birthday morning as if it were yesterday. Noah had awakened before dawn bearing a single pale rose and trembling apology. She had laughed at his awkward nervousness and pressed her palm to his chest. He had whispered that he never wanted that day to end, his eyes shining with hope. They had gathered friends and family in the sunlit garden, laughter echoing under pastel bunting. A towering vanilla cake had been carried outside, its icing smudged by careless forks and eager children. Noah had caught her gaze across the table and raised his glass in a tentative toast. She had felt an inexplicable tremor in his smile as he mouthed words only she recognized. But as evening fell, the glow of celebration dimmed in his eyes, replaced by distant shadows. He had lingered by the garden gate, whispering excuses about urgent business. She had followed him into the twilight, voice trembling as she asked if everything was all right. He had kissed her forehead, murmured that sometimes love frightened him more than anything else. At the stroke of midnight, he had slipped away from the laughter, leaving only an empty chair beside her. She had searched the shadows until she found him at the fountain, staring into its reflection. He had turned, eyes haunted, and confessed that birthdays reminded him of loss. She had embraced him then, unaware it would be the last time she felt his warmth entirely. Now, years later, that forgotten birthday haunted her as she unraveled his secrets. She understood her heart should have quivered with alarm instead of hope. The memory of his smile, tinged with fear, was a prophecy she had ignored. She closed her eyes, whispering a solemn promise to herself. She would never let fear eclipse love ever again. On a crisp early Tuesday morning, Avery unlocked the bakery door to find Elise, standing hesitantly beneath the sign. The older woman seemed fragile yet fierce, her eyes reflecting relief and apprehension in equal measure. Avery's breath caught as she recognized the familiar locket around Elise's neck, silver gleaming softly. Words failed them both until Margot stepped forward, offering hot tea and a steady smile. Elise's voice trembled as she explained how she had escaped Noah's control after the lake house incident. She followed hidden forest paths until a delivery man named Frank smuggled her to a distant town. She moved in secret for weeks, changing locations to stay off his radar. Each of her words peeled away Avery's lingering fear. Avery offered her hand, tears welling as she realized Elise's silent bravery. She asked how Elise had managed to remain hidden for so long, and Elise confessed nights spent in abandoned barns and safe houses. Shared pain wove them together, bridging the gap between two women broken by the same man. In that moment, the bakery's hum faded, leaving only solidarity and newfound hope. Margot placed fresh mugs of coffee on the table, grounding the gravity of Elise's arrival. Together, they strategized about notifying authorities discreetly and gathering evidence to ensure Noah could no longer manipulate anyone. Elise retrieved a worn journal filled with names, dates, and confessions, proof that would topple his empire of control. Avery's heart swelled with determination. She would not let his darkness claim another life. As the afternoon sun warmed the windowsill, the phone rang with an unknown number. Elise answered, voice taut, then whispered, "It's Frank Clark calling." Avery and Margot exchanged startled glances, hearts pounding in sudden dread. Elise's eyes filled with urgent fear as she said, "Noah knows I'm here, and he's coming immediately." When Avery gently prodded, Elise unfolded the deepest secret. She had not vanished by chance, but by design. Noah had paid her a lump sum and coerced her with threats to abandon her life forever. She spoke of nights trembling in cheap motels, haunted by guilt for leaving him. Each detail she shared illuminated the magnitude of his control. Avery felt her chest tighten as Elise described the day she tried to reclaim her keys at the old lake house. Meanwhile, Noah had arrived unexpectedly, voice cold, and asserted that her loyalty was a contract she could never break. Elise recalled confronting him, voice shaking as she declared her right to freedom. He had smiled, pitying, and offered her money once more to vanish. She paused, meeting Avery's gaze, and confessed that she still carried the locket he had forced her to wear as a reminder of his ownership. Its presence around Avery's neck now symbolized more than memory. It represented defiance. Margot listened in awe as Elise revealed that the journal contained names of other women silenced similarly. The weight of those confessions hung heavy between them. Determined, Avery suggested they share the evidence with Dr. Simone next, hoping his authority could challenge Noah's narrative. Elise nodded, revealing dozens of signed statements tucked between journal pages. She explained that discovering others' testimonies had given her courage to return. Together, they drafted a plan to present the proof to authorities and the press. Late that evening, their phones buzzed with a group message including Elise's name, followed by a chilling warning. "Leave this alone, or you'll disappear too." Avery inhaled sharply, staring at the screen. Margot's hand trembled as she placed her mug down. Elise met Avery's eyes, voice steady. "He knows." Avery stood at the crossroads before dawn, the quiet hum of the bakery's ovens below matching her restless thoughts. The evidence lay before her, the journal, signed statements, and Elise's heartfelt testimony. She knew that going public would unleash a whirlwind. Noah would fight back with every resource at his disposal. Yet she also understood that silence would betray every woman he had ever harmed. She dialed Dr. Simone's number, voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. "Doctor, it's time," she said. "I have everything we discussed." His calm response steadied her nerves. As she described the final details, she felt the weight of responsibility settle into purpose. This was no longer just her battle. It was a movement for justice. By mid-morning, a discreet meeting convened in a neutral office. Elise and Margot sat beside Avery as she laid out the facts. The therapist nodded gravely, then excused himself to prepare a formal statement. Moments later, he returned with a prepared affidavit he was willing to file immediately. Elise's hand shook as she signed, her signature a roar of defiance. Outside, news vans began to gather quietly, tipped off by an anonymous source. Avery breathed in the fresh air, steeling herself for what came next. She turned to Elise and Margot, determination burning in her eyes. "I choose truth," she declared. "We'll face whatever he throws at us." Their united nod was a pact, a promise that no threat could shatter. Later, as the first reporters arrived, Avery stepped forward, shoulders squared and voice unwavering. She held the journal aloft. "This is our story," she announced. Cameras flashed, recording the moment when a woman chose justice over fear and altered Noah's world forever. A year had passed since the day Avery stood before the press and shattered Noah's facade. The bakery had become a sanctuary not only for fresh bread, but for survivors seeking solace. Elise managed the front counter, her laughter echoing alongside the scent of cinnamon buns. Margot supervised new hires with a motherly grin, her once-worn hands now steady and strong. Every month, Avery held a support circle in the shop's back room, where women shared stories of survival and renewal. The locket, once a symbol of entrapment, now rested on a velvet cushion above the fireplace as a reminder of their triumph. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Avery presented Elise with a hand-woven shawl, each stitch representing a woman whose voice had been reclaimed. Tears welled, but joy triumphed over sorrow. In the days since disclosure, Noah had retreated into obscurity, stripped of status and influence. Legal judgments had forced him to compensate his victims, and court orders barred him from contact. In rare interviews, he spoke of regret and therapy, but no one believed the words whispered through misdirection. The truth, once buried, had refused to stay hidden. That morning, as sunlight streamed through flower-lined windows, Avery locked the front door and stepped outside, the locket around her neck catching the light. Elise waved from the doorway, their bond unbreakable. Margot joined them, offering mugs of celebratory tea. They toasted to resilience, each sip a testament to courage born from fear. Avery inhaled deeply, heart full. The bakery's bells tinkled as a new customer entered, another soul seeking comfort. Avery smiled and called, "Welcome home." In that moment, she understood fully that freedom was not just surviving darkness, but transforming it into light. And in their little bakery, light overflowed. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, comment, and share. Also turn on the bell to get more of our videos. See you in the next story.